For a lot of us, certain memories are tied to a very specific feeling. That feeling of unapologetic indulgence, a big family night out, and, of course, the almost mythical promise of unlimited everything. And for so many people, that memory has a name: Beefsteak Charlie's.
If you ever went, you know the name brings up more than just a meal. It's that memory of pure abundance, of feeling like you were getting the most incredible deal. It really wasn't just a restaurant, was it? It was an event, a destination built on this feeling of almost overwhelming generosity.
So what was the big deal? Well, it was this simple, almost unbelievable promise. You weren't just getting a steak, you were getting an entire experience where the shrimp, the salad, the beer, and yeah, the sangria just kept on coming. This was the whole strategy, and it's what packed families into those kind of weird neo-Victorian pub dining rooms night after night.
So you gotta ask the question, right? What in the world happened? How could a chain that was so popular, so much a part of the culture on the East Coast just vanish? That's the story we're gonna dig into. To really get why it disappeared, we first have to go back and remember what it actually felt like to be there. Because honestly, it was never just about the food. It was about the entire atmosphere.
Let's be real, this was not fine dining. Not even close. It was a social experience, it was all about celebration and feeling like you were getting an amazing deal. And yeah, it famously cared way more about quantity than quality. This steak, it might not have been prime cut, and people still talk about how the shrimp weren't always deveined, but you know what? That wasn't the point. The point was the sheer unapologetic amount of it.
The whole vibe was designed to make you feel like you were being taken care of, like you were totally spoiled. For so many families, this was the spot for birthdays and celebrations. It was the very first place a lot of us ever even tried shrimp cocktail or baby back ribs.
Okay, so here's a little twist. The chain that most of us remember, it actually wasn't the original at all. Its whole success story is this classic tale of really clever timing and even cleverer rebranding.
So the chain that became this huge pop culture icon was actually a really smart pivot. You had this restaurateur, Larry Ellman, whose steak and brew chain was kind of failing. So he was looking for a new identity, and he found out that the name Beefsteak Charlie's from some old unrelated New York restaurant was totally available. He just took it, threw in the unlimited idea, and boom. He captured the spirit of the late 70s and early 80s perfectly.
So how did they manage to build such a powerful brand so fast? It's simple, really. They just leaned all the way into their gimmick, that promise of unlimited. It wasn't just some promotion, it was the entire brand.
I mean, listen to their slogans. They were so bold, so direct. A line like, "I'll feed you like there's no tomorrow." That's not just a suggestion, that's challenge.
And this one, you're gonna get spoiled. That was the core message right there. This was a place for pure indulgence, not for holding back. It was like they were giving you permission to forget the diet, have another beer, and peel one more shrimp.
And of course, you had the guy in the commercials. The brand had a face. With his mustache and those sleeve garters, Tom Lacey's Beefsteak Charlie was this friendly, generous guy everyone recognized. And he often had his nephew with him, Beefsteak Chuck, who was supposedly bringing in all these new, healthier ideas from restaurant school.
And here's where they were really smart. The deals were made to get the whole family in the door. For the parents, you had bottomless pitchers of beer and sangria, which made it a fantastic value. For the kids, it was heaven. All the shrimp they could eat and super cheap burgers. It was just a no-brainer for a family night out. But you knew this was coming, right? The very thing that Beefsteak Charlie's famous also made it incredibly fragile. See, a business model that's built on unlimited is basically a high-wire act, and the world down below was starting to change.
At its absolute height, this chain was a giant in the casual dining world. It was a household name. If you were on the East Coast, it felt like they were everywhere.
But then, get this, just 5 years later, the number of locations was cut almost in half. The decline was so fast, it was a real shock to the customers who were still packing the places that were left.
And, well, the financial numbers, they tell the real story. The company was just bleeding money, losing $20 million in just 3 years. It just proved that the whole all-you-can-eat thing was built on razor-thin margins. I mean, you can't offer everybody unlimited if your own costs keep going up.
And the world around them was changing fast. It wasn't just one thing, it was a perfect storm. The cost of their main stuff, beef and shrimp, went through the roof. At the exact same time, the 80s brought in this new focus on health and fitness, and suddenly the idea of all-you-can-eat just started to feel dated.
You had new, trendier places like TGI Fridays popping up. But maybe the biggest hit was cultural. People were becoming way more aware of drunk driving, and offering unlimited alcohol suddenly became a massive legal and financial liability. The very foundation of Beefsteak Charlie's was cracking from every single side.
So, why? Decades after it disappeared, why do so many people still remember it so fondly? Well, its legacy isn't really about the food, is it? It's about the feeling it represented. We remember Beefsteak Charlie's because it was way more than a restaurant. It was a cultural artifact. It belonged to a time before foodie culture took over, a time when going out to eat was just about celebrating and having a ton of food. It wasn't pretending to be fancy or gourmet. It was just a fun, loud, and filling place to be. And of course, its place in our memory was sealed by pop culture. You had that completely bizarre SNL parody where waiters pre-chewed your food, and then Chandler on Friends drunkenly mumbling about Beefsteak Charlie's. All those little references kept the name alive long after the restaurants closed, and they basically turned it into shorthand for a certain kind of 80s nostalgia.
And really, this is the main takeaway. Beefsteak Charlie's didn't disappear because people stopped liking it. People still loved it. It disappeared because the world it was built for just moved on. Tastes changed, the economics shifted, and the whole culture evolved. It was this bold, generous experiment that just couldn't survive in the new reality it found itself in. And it kind of leaves you with a question, doesn't it? What beloved brands of today are just as tied to our current moment, and maybe just as destined to become someone else's fond, distant memory?